Look at your heater right now. Maybe it reads 20 degrees, maybe 24. You set it once and forgot it exists. But for over 300,000 years, every one of your ancestors faced this same winter, every single year, without that dial. No brick walls, no thermal insulation, no electricity. Just hands, animal bones, and a cold so brutal it would kill a modern human in a matter of hours. So how did they not just survive, but thrive? The answer will change forever the way you look at your own home. First, understand what that cold actually was. We're talking about minus 35 degrees on the Eurasian steppe. This isn't the cold of walking to your car in the morning. This is the cold where exposed skin starts dying within minutes, where breathing hurts, where the wind doesn't just bother you, it hunts you. A modern human dropped there, unprepared, would probably never see the dawn. The popular image is always the same. People shivering in dark caves, huddled around a weak fire. Archaeology tells a completely different story, a story of engineers. And here's the first mistake almost everyone makes about our ancestors. They almost never lived in caves. At a site in Russia, nearly 800,000 years old, researchers found circular depressions over 2 meters deep and 4 meters in diameter. Tool marks in the ground proved they were deliberately dug, not naturally formed. Why? Because 2 meters below the surface, the soil temperature stays 10 to 15 degrees warmer than the air above. Your ancestors didn't fight the cold, they went below it.
But the real sophistication came later, at a site in what is now the Czech Republic, around 26,000 years ago. Archaeologists found winter shelters with walls built in multiple layers, each with a precise thermal function. On the inside, animal hide with the fur turned inward, trapping warm air against the body. Then, a layer of dry grass and moss, absorbing moisture. On the outside, woven mats of reed and tree bark, resistant to wind, but breathable enough to let moisture escape before it froze and destroyed the structure from within. This wasn't improvisation, it was planned thermal engineering, layer by layer, the same principle behind the insulation in your walls today. Modern construction uses vapor barriers, foam insulation, and weatherproof sealing. Your Ice Age ancestors used hide, moss, and bark. The materials were different, the physics were identical. Now comes the extraordinary part. In Ukraine and Russia, researchers discovered something that stopped archaeologists in their tracks the first time they saw it. Houses. Not caves, not simple windbreaks, designed structures built entirely from woolly mammoth bones. Picture the scene. Mammoth skulls, each weighing over 90 kilograms, used as foundation blocks. Curved tusks arranged into dome-shaped frames. Hundreds of smaller bones filling the gaps, providing structural support. The entire construction covered in layers of stitched mammoth hide, thick enough to block the wind, shaped precisely to shed snow. This isn't survival instinct. This is architecture. And experimental reconstructions of these houses confirmed what the archaeology already suggested. A well-built mammoth bone house could keep the interior temperature 20 to 25 degrees warmer than the outside air, using only modest fires. Modern Arctic shelters with industrial insulation and electric heating often performed no better. Stop and think about that. Stone Age builders, using nothing but bone, hide, and stone tools, matched the thermal performance of modern Arctic engineering.
But none of this worked without fire. And fire wasn't just warmth. It was the entire operating system of life in the Ice Age winter. The mammoth bone houses had a central hearth for main heat, and smaller fires scattered around the perimeter, creating temperature zones for specific tasks. Food preparation in one corner, tool making in another, children and elders always in the warmest spots. The layout wasn't random, it was planned. On the treeless steppe, wood wasn't always available, so your ancestors developed an alternative fuel system. Dried and prepared mammoth dung, bones processed to maximize burning. Chemical analysis of hearth residue shows these fuels were deliberately treated, not just thrown on the fire, but adjusted to generate specific heat. They didn't burn whatever they found, they managed fuel as a scarce resource. And then there was ventilation. This is the part that impresses modern Arctic engineers the most. Without proper air circulation, moisture from breathing and cooking builds up inside any enclosed shelter. In sub-zero temperatures, that moisture freezes and the structure fails from within. Archaeological evidence shows carefully designed airflow systems. Small openings near the floor pulled in fresh air, larger openings near the top let warm, moist air escape before it turned into ice. Now, the part most documentaries completely ignore. What happened inside these shelters after the sun went down? For hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors went to sleep at dusk and woke before dawn. But they didn't sleep the way you sleep.
They slept in 2 blocks, 4 hours of sleep, then a period of wakefulness lasting 1 to 2 hours, then another 4 hours until dawn. This wasn't insomnia. It was the default human sleep pattern, documented in historical records from dozens of cultures, and confirmed in a 1992 experiment in which people deprived of artificial light for a month all returned to the same 2-phase pattern. Anthropologists who studied people still living close to this original pattern noticed something curious. Nighttime conversation was categorically different from daytime conversation. During the day, most talk was practical, about hunting, logistics, resources. But at night, around the fire, the overwhelming majority of conversation consisted of stories. The fire was the original theater, the original classroom. The famous female figurines found at Paleolithic sites, most discovered in winter shelter contexts. The cave paintings associated with this period, many created during the long months of winter confinement. The art that defined our species wasn't born in summer's warmth. It was born by firelight, inside houses of bone, while the steppe outside lay locked in ice. Building a mammoth bone house required 2 to 3 weeks of intense labor with 8 to 10 adults, which means construction had to begin in late summer or early fall, well before conditions made outdoor work impossible. These weren't reactive builders. They were planners with seasonal calendars running in their heads. Food storage was equally engineered. In permafrost regions, underground chambers connected to winter shelters by short tunnels acted as natural refrigerators, keeping meat frozen and accessible through the entire winter, even in the worst storms. Clothing followed the same layered principle as the shelters, multiple layers of different hides, each chosen for a specific thermal property. The inner layer trapped warm air. The outer layer blocked wind and moisture. The same physics as a modern winter jacket, developed independently, out of pure necessity, thousands of years before any synthetic fabric existed. And when a shelter was damaged, which happened often, it was repaired immediately. Evidence shows continuous maintenance throughout the winter seasons. Broken bones replaced, hide coverings patched, insulation renewed. This wasn't a structure built and hoped for the best. It was a living system, managed at all times. By the end of the Ice Age, as the climate warmed and forests expanded, all of this knowledge was abandoned. Not lost to catastrophe, just gradually made unnecessary. Modern Arctic engineers, studying the remains of these Paleolithic shelters, were genuinely surprised. Military Arctic training programs today teach shelter-building methods derived from these 20,000-year-old archaeological reconstructions. Humanitarian aid organizations have adapted these techniques for emergency construction in extreme environments. We lost the knowledge, spent 100 years rediscovering it with modern science, and found that our ancestors had already solved it all, perfectly, with bones and stone tools. Now look at your heater again. That number represents a temperature your ancestors would have considered miraculous. Not because they couldn't achieve that warmth, they could, under conditions far more extreme than anything you will ever face, but because earning that warmth cost everything. Every warm night required weeks of preparation, months of planning, continuous physical labor, and engineering knowledge so precise that a single mistake could mean a family frozen before dawn. The stories you tell your children at night are direct descendants of the myths told by firelight, inside houses of bone on a frozen steppe. You didn't invent warmth. You inherited it from the most ingenious engineers who ever lived, who had only the cold, time, and a refusal to die. And the next time the cold comes and you simply touch the heater without thinking, remember what it cost to get here and understand for the first time just how extraordinarily rare it is to be warm.